Meet Zip Security, an all-in-one cybersecurity and IT platform. Affordable, accessible, and powerful.
I'm John Merklinger with Zip Security. Kyle Carlton is with Triple Key. And today we're going to discuss how to govern AI before it becomes your client's biggest liability, as AI is becoming more important to be aware of and how to handle it. And there's just a lot of unknowns around it. And so Kyle and I are going to discuss how we can help teams do just that. Before going into it, would love to just give it over to Kyle for a quick introduction and quick overview of Triple Key.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me. So my name's Kyle Carlton. I'm COO of Triple Key. Let's see, married to Jenny, 3 kids. We've been at this, working family life and startup life for 3 years now. So it's been good. We're located in Nashville, Tennessee.
Excellent. And as I mentioned before, John Merklinger, based out of Boston, Massachusetts. And in my job with Zip Security, I lead our partnership channel. And so onboarding, new partners, virtual CISOs, other security advisors. And, myself, my personal life, live with my wife, Lauren, our 3 kids, and who all keep us, quite busy, especially here in the summer months. And so,
Right.
yeah, but Kyle, today I know what we're going to get into is, how teams can map the blast radius of, an AI incident across a client's development before it happens. We'll get into unknown and unauthorized contributors being one of the more underrated AI risk vectors that clients and virtual CISOs aren't talking about enough with their clients. And then we're going to start to get into, how Triple Key is able to help companies with what they're able to provide, and then getting into, some automated AI governance workflows and, how we can start to utilize those and, start to understand and change the unit economics of your practice. And so, excited to get into all of this, Kyle. And there's no shortage of topics to get into, but
No, there's not.
I'll kick it off, over to you. And just want to, set the stage, so as I mentioned, I work with a lot of, virtual CISOs, and Zip Security does. And so asking, when they inherit a client that's already, deployed AI tools, what are some of the first things that Triple Key and your team can surface that a client had no idea that were there in the first place?
Yeah, great question. So I'd say the first surprise is really, twofold. It's age and severity. So this is mainly due to the forensic approach that we take. Most think developer tools have them covered. However, these are only scanning based upon the developer or organization settings. These scan what's being written, not what was shipped 2 months ago, let alone 2 years ago. So it's important, we often find secrets in history, including private RSA keys. And then the most, I'd say the next is probably the dependency tree. So we generate a searchable software bill of materials. This is typically overdone. Mostly this was typically done in certain funding rounds, M&A, highly regulated industries like medical devices. Most are familiar with them, especially the people on this call, but most organizations have never put one together, let alone kept it updated.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Interesting. What's typical of the typical reaction that clients are showing when you're uncovering sort of these unknowns?
I'd say, the first would be like speed to value. I mean, the hitting the secrets and having the searchable bill of materials just on demand, refreshed every 24 hours is just a huge productivity unlock. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the unknown contributors piece. It's if you're a team of 2, you probably know who's contributing to your code. But if you're a growing team and have utilized, offshore development shops, this is where things get really interesting. They can't tell us who are actually is writing the code. And then you enter in AI to the mix, and that gap just gets wider because the code is landing in a repo that no human really authored, maybe even reviewed.
It's fascinating stuff.
It is. It is. So, well, let me ask you a question. So, AI agents, they're operating, with credentials that were never designed for autonomous action. What does this, actually look like from your all standpoint when it goes wrong in a client environment?
Yeah. So what we're finding is most teams, their environments, they still treat AI agents like regular SaaS apps. They get a service account, an API key, or delegated OAuth access, and then nobody actually revisits what they actually do. And so we find the failure mode is pretty simple. The agent can access way more data and systems and workflows than initially intended. And so, we've actually seen, agents connected to email file storage, ticketing systems, or even internal knowledge bases, for example, and they just have broad permissions because it was the fastest way to get them to working. It's the path of least resistance. And it's, we're finding, the issue isn't really like AI, it's the identity, it's the identity models built for humans are now being used for these autonomous systems. Uh,
Love it.
yeah. And so I guess, back to what you're uncovering with your clients. I mean, what's Triple Key being able to show your clients that, no other tool was catching before?
Yeah, so I'd say it's the daily forensic software composition analysis across all dependencies, surfaced in a way that both technical and non-technical leaders can understand. Most scanners answer two questions: what package am I using, and which ones have CVEs? It's useful, but it really stops at the component level. We look at the dependencies of dependencies, understand who's behind the code, the software bill of materials, and that contributor risk. And I'd say the other piece is just cadence. All the credentialing, it's great, SOC 2, high trust, ISO, but those are just point in time. It's kind of the audit of behavior. And most of the breaches and the things that are happening are hitting people that had one or more of them. So, and I'd say the last part would be the enterprise dashboard, but that helps organizations really understand the risk that's being brought in through the deeper supply chain that engineering tools just don't expose.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's why Triple Key Zip Security we work so well together is because we're both trying to accomplish really complex issues and attack complex issues, but working with teams that don't have that traditional technical background. And so I love that your team is able to turn that technical detail into plain language insights that higher ups executives can act on it without necessarily having to getting down to the nitty gritty and like reading the code.
Yeah, it's a simple score. And I don't know if I should disclose. I mean, I'm a customer of Zip Security before we formed, before we started doing webinars together. But yeah, same type thing. I mean, we're in security, but it doesn't mean, security casts a wide net,
Hmm.
so feel the same way about your all's product. I mean, it's simple to act on. So
Doesn't have to be complex. It's important, but we can make it simple. So yeah,
yeah,
I love that we're
keep it
aligned on
simple.
that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, well, speaking of, so like the over permissions, agent identities are kind of showing up everywhere right now. How does a VC so find them, like even across a full book of clients?
Yeah, so what we're finding with a lot of our virtual CISOs, I mean, they want to address this, but most of them just don't have an inventory of agent identities right now. So we want to give the starting point obviously is visibility. You need to identify every non-human identity, if you will, across Google Workspace, Entra, Okta, and the additional SaaS applications, and take it a step further with API integrations and other AI platforms. And then what we're suggesting teams do is like you got to map each identity and what they can access, and if those permissions were actually justified. Should they get access to everything that you initially told them they should? And it's not really the challenge is finding one risky agent. It's finding the 50 that you didn't know existed. It's the unknowns, if you will. And so with that centralized visibility, you can you're relying on documentation that's usually incomplete within weeks of within deployment. And so with Zip Security, this is the first time a virtual CISO and their clients are seeing, a clean real-time map of every identity and non-human identity and permission across their client portfolio. And the reactions are typically the same. It's relief and then a little bit of panic, relief because they have this availability, panic because of, what they're seeing and what they didn't know.
It's always the 1-2 punch.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face, right? And so sometimes
That's right.
teams are seeing like, oh, okay, we got to act a little bit different. We got to adapt. But Zip Security and companies like Triple Key are here to make those a little less harder, a little bit easier to get through. So on the same line along unknown contributors, there's something that most virtual CISOs are not even asking about yet. So what are you seeing in like client code bases and like why does it get worse with AI from your perspective?
Yeah. So, what we see is that typically the people that are writing, a company software are not always the company's employees. The easiest case is, you have open source maintainers and contractors to account for, right? So, there was the XYZ, the XZ backdoor last year. More recently, there was the Axios breach, and that's really unknown contributor risk in its purest form. I would say AI makes it worse in two specific ways. First, accountability can be lost. Code gets committed under a developer's name, but I would say, it generated code that no human can actually vouch for. So your code authorship stops meaning what you think it means. And then second, AI is, it hallucinates, right? It's been known to invent some dependencies. More commonly, it recommends older ones. Research has found that like 1 in 5 packages, an AI just kind of made up. And what attackers are doing is just registering those names and they wait. It's called slop squatting. So essentially, you have code of uncertain authorship pulling in packages of uncertain origin, and you really don't have visibility into either. So we're seeing a lot of that lately.
Yeah, and you mentioned, these attackers, sometimes they're getting pretty sophisticated. Other times, they have all the time in the world and they don't need to be, taking thousands of
All
dollars from
they
you or
do.
anything. They have all the time. So if they can take a penny a day, they'll do that. If they can get more, they'll do it. But AI is just making their job, much more easier. And so, yeah, again, that's what, we want to help companies, prevent these, these types of events, and these unknowns for sure.
Yeah. Hackers don't have regulatory compliance.
No, they do not. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, when you're able to show like a VC, so exactly, what identities we can, kind of going from the contributors piece, they have access to in real time, across their whole client base. What really changes for them operationally?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a breath of fresh air for them. I mean, the conversation, really shifts from assumptions to facts. So, if, for example, instead of asking like, "Do we think MFA is actually being enforced?" or "Do we know who can access customer data?" they can answer this immediately and with confidence, which is a big game changer versus traditional approaches that they've done in the past. And so, reviews that used to take days can now take sometimes minutes, maybe an hour or two. And these security assessments are evidence-based versus being interview-based. And I really think, the most important thing that we're finding is they can identify risky access before it becomes, shows up in an audit finding or, an unfortunate security event, if you will. And so it's really, visibility is being able to turn it into identity governance. It turns identity governance from a periodic project into something that's actually operational. And so, that's what we want to do. And whether it's with security, it's with compliance, it's not just about getting companies that initial strong security posture. It's about keeping them there as they grow, as they add on new technologies. And that's where a lot of security projects are falling short, is even if you get to a strong security posture initially, companies are moving too fast, especially with the use of AI. And so technical drift occurs. They become, more vulnerable to security events, and then they get hit with the unexpected, unfortunately. More often than than we'd like. So from your perspective, Kyle, if virtual CISOs wanted to start asking better questions around contributor risk today, what's one thing they should demand visibility into before any AI tool goes into a client environment?
Oh, this is a layup one. I think getting a proper code baseline is critical before introducing any AI tools into the pipeline. It's necessary, if you want to roll back any improper changes. Git was a technology that was built for this, but teams should make sure to capture that baseline regardless. And I'd say, a vCISO should require everybody to do code review of all AI coding changes and require a team member to approve those. This is in effect going to create a digital signature for each change in order to establish and maintain proper attribution for AI generated code.
So AI is not going to take over everyone's job when it comes to coding. You need that human in the loop still, you're saying.
I don't think, yeah, no. I mean, it helps you move fast, but it doesn't, it enhances, great teams. It
Exactly.
doesn't make bad teams, great.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
no. Well, and what's the moment the VCSOs, from your all's perspective, really realize that they've been flying blind on identity, and what is it that what is getting that visibility actually unlocked?
Yeah, I mean, it's usually, these virtual CISOs, they're leading client engagements, before sometimes before we're being introduced to them. But again, they're defining what that good security looks like for them, and they're uncovering gaps. But again, it's what we're able to show is what's actually true. versus, what they assume. And so when it comes specifically to AI, maybe it's, showing an AI agent has admin access that nobody remembered, granting. Maybe former contractors and employees still have active accounts, which is never a good thing. We've
It
seen,
never happened.
yeah, right? Yeah, who would do such a thing? That's crazy. But we've seen it where, a customer-facing application is connected to dozens of third-party integrations, and, that's introducing a whole plethora of vulnerabilities. And so really, visibility is unlocking the ability to enforce policy instead of hoping policy is followed. And we can actually show evidence with confidence. And so once virtual CISOs are seeing every identity, every permission, every exemption, governments is becoming, much, much more manageable rather than, theoretical, if you will.
Somebody asked me like if I was a user of Zip, and I said yeah, and they said why, and I said because it makes me feel smart.
I
It
hear
makes me
you.
look smart. Yeah, that's the way she's like.
I've
So
been here for a little over 6 months, and I feel it's made me into somewhat of a security subject matter expert for
yeah,
cybersecurity because it's simple. And cybersecurity doesn't have to be as complex as legacy players making it. It's really coming down to protecting people, your devices, your data, and having a policy that's easily digestible and easy for employees to follow. Which gets down to, sort of like, on the opposite end, when you don't have one, we can talk through, this potential blast radius. So from your perspective, walk me through what blast radius actually looks like from a software visibility standpoint. What are you tracing and where does it usually, end up?
yeah. So I'd say like let's start with one component. Let's say a single open source package has a vulnerability or gets compromised. The blast radius is simply tracing that one component outwards through the dependency graph, which applications include it, which services those applications run on, and which systems they touch, and which data sits behind those systems. It almost never stays small. A library 3 levels deep inside of a production app holding customer, maybe patient data. It frequently originates outside the company's sphere of control, created inside of apps that are maintained by vendors and open source communities that often reside in other countries, bringing it full circle to contributor. So, yeah. And, really an SBOM, like a software bill of materials, is designed to map that exposure ahead of time at the component level. It's an excellent tool to stay ahead and help minimize risk.
Understood. Understood. Yeah, I mean, and then curious on that. I mean, what are the type of clients that are coming to you? What are the industry size? Is it all over the place, or are you seeing one more than the other, if you will?
A little bit. I mean, we've seen everything from, people vibe coding that have no idea, they just want to kind of the check the box, like, is what I've built safe, all the way up to, we've got large enterprise clients, that are wanting to actually monitor all of their, connected partners, and that's the whole goal is just to keep people safe. So, yeah, it's really clients of all sizes, but, I'd say our sweet spot is just teams that are moving fast and want to make sure that they're staying safe.
Yeah, I think it's a blessing and a curse where everyone's a vibe coder, and the other side, everyone's a vibe coder. So even
Yeah.
as a former sales person, being able to get in there, it's cool. But there's certainly things that I'm probably overlooking, and like you said, we need to have the right governance and guardrails in place because who knows what people are uploading into some of these these tools, and hopefully it's nothing that's compromising or anything around IP, but it's happening. And teams need to be aware of it and need to be able to take action on it.
It's a tool. It can be
It's
used for good or it can be weaponized.
exactly.
So anyway, well, yeah, and switching gear. I mean, a little bit. I mean, you've talk. That's a good segue into you talk a lot about like getting the basics right before layering in AI specific tooling, and we mentioned that. But what are the fundamentals that most clients are missing, and what's the blast radius? When those gaps meet an agentic AI deployment from your all side.
Yeah, and when Zip Security, when we're approaching cybersecurity, we're not reinventing the wheel. We are going back to basics and fundamentals. But we find most teams are doing this, 50% of the way. And with Zip Security, they can, get that full 100%, get the full effort. And AI has just made the fundamentals matter more, obviously, not less. The blast radius is just going to get bigger now when you skip these fundamentals. And so, when we say fundamentals, we're saying things like MFA everywhere, strong identity governance, device management, endpoint protection, having a great discipline around onboarding and offboarding of employees. Um, and really, just having that continuous visibility that we mentioned before into access. And so before companies come to Zip Security, I mean, a lot of them can't answer simple questions like, do we know every account? Are we actually secure? Are those, accounts, compliant? Is, if they're using an EDR tool or a tool like CrowdStrike, can they, confidently say that it's on every endpoint, every device? And, unfortunately, when those gaps exist, AI is just going to amplify them. So, an over-permissioned agent, for example, inherits weak controls at machine speed. And so we're finding, the blast radius isn't caused by AI. It's just exposing security debt or gaps that were, already there, unfortunately, for teams.
It's a lot. Well, and it kind of maps back to what we were saying earlier, which is, just, I mean, that's like the big thing when a VC so gets access, and runs this for the first time, they're relieved and panicked at the same time. I mean, it's good news, bad news, but I'd say, definitely the thing for us with Zip was just getting that visibility first was huge
But you want to get that
and simple.
visibility. Yeah. You want to get that. Yeah, you're right. You want to get that visibility. And then the next step is, all right, we have that visibility. We have that control over endpoints. And then we want to, deploy that security baseline, typically tied to some type of compliance framework and rules with compliance framework. But then it's that enforcement engine and being able to continuously enforcement and operationalize it. And that can be challenging if, you don't have a tool like Zip, because it can be, a full-time job. And even with, those resources, it can still be, hard to fully operationalize. And so, yeah, you need both tools like Zip Security, like Triple Key, to make sure that you're covered, and you have that, full holistic approach into your security posture.
And I'd say also if there's not, if somebody doesn't have a dedicated resource, that's like in the security seat, how do they manage it when they're managing 20 other priorities as well?
Hmm. Yeah,
I think,
we well, we see it from both ways. We have like a VP of engineering that will use a tool, but that's not their full-time job.
yeah.
So being able to have that automation in place is super helpful for them because they know that they're secure, they're staying there. On the other side, you might have that dedicated team or two people, but they're working for 800 employees. And so they're just under-resourced, understaffed, and not enough time in the day to do all the things that they want to do. And so, yeah, able to make that team like, feel like that team of two feel like a team of 20 with, some of these automations that we're able to introduce.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. And so, sort of, rounding this out, I mean, from, Triple Key's perspective, what do you guys, what are you guys working on right now? What's new and exciting for you guys that you'd love to share?
Yeah, I'd say, first thing is just this conversation. We started the company 3 years ago and had this really ambitious goal to help, bridge the communication gap between technicals and non-technicals, by focusing on, the risk, licensing, contributors, and surfacing that in a way that everybody understood. The fact is when you suffer a breach, it affects every department at the company. So why not get ahead of that and bring everybody to the table before that happens? So that whole AI tsunami has just moved the conversation truly from like slide decks and niche industry conversations to the front page. And it's just a really exciting time. Our core product, Triple Scan, was really built for a time like this. And I'd say the last thing that's really exciting is we're launching a free tool that actually everything we've been talking about is on the SCA. Software composition analysis side, but we're launching a free tool that scans the external environments for clients. And I'm sure we can make that available in show notes or something like that. But yeah, super excited about that. That launches just in a few days.
That's awesome. I can only imagine the sales teams, they're busy. You got people lining up out the door trying to get their hands on this.
It's fun. It's definitely a fun and really, really busy time over here. So, but we're having a blast. So
Awesome. Love to hear that.
yeah. So I guess one last question for you. How do you all think about helping VCSOs build a governance framework that scales across, 15, 20 clients without becoming that full-time job? And how do you sell that as a premium deliverable to clients who still kind of view this as like just the checkbox?
Yeah, I mean, those are conversations that, you need to convince the powers that be that are going to be signing these checks that, yes, you've invested in, somewhat of your security, but it's going to take additional investment to make sure that you keep them there. And so with virtual CISOs, they're able to provide this, consistent experience from client to client where, again, they're deploying they're defining what the security strategy should be, introducing Zip Security as a partner to implement that strategy. And then they're able to, again, take on more clients because, we're doing a lot of that automation that they were typically, working on. And so we find the initial mistake is, treating governments as documentation. It needs to be operationalized. And so we, arm virtual CISO to do just that. Allow them to have, repeatable controls, give them that visibility that they, rarely have, and then be that continuous enforcement engine. And it really goes back down to just, building that standard framework for your identities, privileged accesses, AI agents that we've discussed, and other
Yeah.
third-party applications. And then you just want to automate evidence collection when possible and reporting when possible, not just for, that ever important audit or compliance effort, but, for any security event and you need to do digital forensics or anything like that, you want to have an easy mechanism to help. And so it's, the value proposition from our perspective, it's straightforward. You're not paying for policies, you're paying for confidence. And, when a regulator, auditor, board member asks for, access to, what, and you can answer immediately with evidence instead of just starting an investigation. And yeah, that's what Zip Security is able to provide them.
Love that. So what's new and exciting over at Zip?
Yeah, the team's keeping busy. I mean, we're continuing to invest in, obviously, growing the team itself and, the product as well. So on the people front, we're growing our go-to-market motion around partnerships, a little bit on the direct side, but really growing a virtual CISO partner ecosystem where we can position our clients and prospects in front of these best-in-class CISOs. So right now we have about 45 that we can leverage and been introducing, to our clients in order to, implement that security strategy without necessarily having to get on, hands-on, unless they want to, of course. And then on the product side, we've released new functionality around data loss protection for Google Drive and Microsoft SharePoint, as well as email security for Google and Microsoft. So on the DLP side, we're identifying, at-risk files, at-risk users, and being able to take action, on those. And then from an email security side, just continuing to give companies a more holistic view of their security posture. So, looking at things like domain protection, protecting them from phishing scams, spoofing and impersonation campaigns, which we're seeing quite a bit. And then just being also see what their own users are doing. And so being able to see at-risk users based off of spam that they're receiving, where they're logging in, if anything looks abnormal, and taking action on that. So yeah, no shortage of keeping busy. And we're excited to release that out shortly.
It's awesome. Y'all are doing great stuff.
Yeah, no, it's been a lot of fun, and would love to say the same for you guys. It's been great to obviously been able to work with you as a client, but just in least my time here, how much you've grown over the last 6 or so months, and only getting stronger with your offering and go to market effort.
Yeah, we love it. Yeah, we appreciate it. And yeah, it's a lot of hard work on our team side. And, just here to keep help companies protect the investment that they've made in their software. So that's why we get up every day.
I love it, Kyle. Well, again, I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope the audience enjoyed it just as much as I did, and I think I got a lot,
Likewise.
quite a bit out of it. And yeah, again, really appreciate you taking the time and walking through what you're seeing, how you're helping companies, and excited to hopefully do one of these, sooner than later with you and continuing to work with you.
Set it up. Love it.
All right, awesome, Kyle. Well, have a good rest of your
Thanks
day.
so much for having me.
All right, appreciate it. Take care.
See you.